Welcome back. In the previous video, we explored all of these shapes and found out which ones were parallelograms. We are using page 350 to write on, and you should still have all of these tiles out in front of you. Go ahead and take some time and flip over all of your tiles. Pause the video if you need to. That way you're looking at all the shapes A through T. Okay, let's go through and figure out which ones are rectangles. I'm just going to use my journal to show you, and you should still have your journal out as well, all of the qualifying factors to be a rectangle. Opposite sides must be congruent. Remember, just like parallelogram, opposite sides must be parallel, but this time we've changed something. There has to be 4 right angles for a rectangle. So this is going to be really easy to spot because on all of these shapes, all we need to search for at the very beginning is 4 right angles. If they don't have 4 right angles, we can already count it out as not being a rectangle. So it's going to go a lot faster. Ready? Letter A. No, I'm actually not going to flip them over. That takes way too long. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide the ones out that are, and maybe we'll just put them, I'll put them maybe over here on the left. So I'm going to move all mine over, and then I'll just line them up over here on the left. We'll use some crayons as the barrier, okay? All right, so maybe you can do the same thing. Set up a barrier. That way it's a little easier. Okay, we're looking for 4 right angle shapes. This one has 4 right angles. This one has 4 right angles. Can you still see those over there? I can't. I'm not quite sure. I think you do. Can. Letter I does. See, I'm looking for just the angle marks. It's going a lot faster. That one has 2. That one has 4. There we go. So these are all the shapes that could be a rectangle. Let's go through them and just double check. Are opposite sides congruent? Yes. Are opposite sides parallel? Yes. Are there 4 right angles? Yes. Then letter B is a rectangle. I know it is a square, but remember it can also be classified as a rectangle. So on page 350, when we find rectangles right here in the box, we're going to write this letter. Letter B is a rectangle. How about D? Opposite, congruent, angles. Yes, all of these are opposite, congruent, and have 4 right angles. So all of these are rectangles. B, D, I, and R. B, D, I, and R. See, that one's much faster to find rectangles. We're going to put these all back in order real quick. Please do that as well. Okay, let's go on the search now for a rhombus. Let's find, actually, the one I did next was square. So actually, let's go with squares. Okay, let's look for squares. In our journal, to be a square, this is so easy. All sides have to be congruent, 4 right angles, and opposite sides are parallel. So this one's very easy. I'm just going to pull them out. That one has 4 right angles, and all sides are the same. So you'd have the same congruency marks on every side. That one is, this has all sides the same, but not 4 right angles, so it can't be that. Remember, this one doesn't have the left and right are not the same size as the top and bottom, so it's not that. This is going really quickly. What do you think about letter R? All sides are the same. See, I could tip it like this, and it would look just like a square. So, yep. Those are the 2 and only squares on there. So take your paper and write BR for squares. So take a look at this. B and R, if you think about it, were squares, rectangles, parallelograms, and a quadrilateral. So a square can be classified as all of those things. A square, a rectangle, a parallelogram, and a quadrilateral. And that is why when we drew our diagram in our journal, that's why the square is inside of the rectangle. It's because it can be a rectangle, it can be a parallelogram, and it can be a quadrilateral. So that was pretty easy and quick to find those out. Let's move on. Let's try to find, let's go with, should we just go with a trapezoid? Sure. No, let's go with our next color, rhombuses. So I'm looking at my journal, and green was the next color. So we're looking for opposite sides are parallel, all sides are congruent. So it has to have those measurements. That's it. Opposite sides are parallel, and all sides are congruent. So if you think about it, opposite sides are parallel, all sides are congruent. A square would always be a rhombus, if you think about it. But not all rhombuses are squares. So that's a little tricky to think through that. But what that means is we only have to have all sides congruent to be a rhombus, as long as all sides are congruent and opposite sides are parallel. So if I'm just looking for the same tick marks, B has that, E has it. Remember, it doesn't have to have right angles. What else has all the same tick marks? L has tick marks on all of them. I call them tick marks. They're really called congruency indicators. And R has those as well. So take a look at these. These would all be, if I was just looking at the classification in my journal as a rhombus, opposite sides are parallel. Are these opposite sides parallel? Yes, definitely, and definitely. I want to double check the letter E one, so I'm going to do that by moving these two just out of the way for a minute. I'm just looking at letter E for a minute. One way to kind of, like, I'm having a hard time, I think these two are parallel, the left and the right, but I'm not entirely sure. So a good thing to do, I think sometimes with your paper, is to find a straight edge and just to kind of double check that. So I'll just do the same mark right here. I'll just trace it. Maybe I'll just trace it with the yellow since that's what I have right here. So I just trace that. And then I just slide it over and I see that it is at the same angle. So if they were to continue on, they would not run into each other. So I just kind of want to check that on the top and bottom of this one. If I went straight like that, would they ever touch? No, they would continue on. So E is a rhombus. So that's kind of a tricky way for me to check it. So right now B is a rhombus because opposite sides, right? E is 1 because it doesn't have to have 4 right angles. L is 1, and so is R. So we have 4 different rhombuses in that section. So a rhombus right here is B, E, L, R. Let's double check. A rhombus has opposite sides are parallel, all sides are congruent. Opposite sides are parallel. Yep, all sides are congruent. Those are our rhombuses. And now we're going to check our trapezoids. So let's put all these back. Whoops, I made a big mess of that up there. That'll be Q. This is good alphabet practice. Put all of your shapes back in order. Let's find out which one of these are trapezoids. Remember, these are Miss Fisher's favorite shape. Make your little crayon barrier. And let's find out what we have to have in order for it to be a trapezoid. This is super important. It can only have one pair of parallel sides. That's it. Only one. So that means all of these that we said had 2 pairs, it can't be that. So it cannot be any of these. B, C, D, E, I, L, R, S. Because those all have 2 sets of parallel sides. So let's just go ahead and let's get rid of B, C, D, E. B, oh, I put those out of order. B, C, D, E. I'm going to stack them to the side. We can get rid of I, L, R, S. I, L, R, and S. I know right now that those are definitely not a trapezoid because they were all parallelograms. They cannot be. They're not on the same length over here. So let's go ahead and find out. So that makes sense too in my picture. Remember, all of these are kind of connected in here except for a trapezoid. It's not even a parallelogram. All it is a trapezoid is a quadrilateral. So we're trying to find all of the trapezoids. Ready for this one? It can only have one pair of parallel sides. So, oh, and I should mention it has to have one pair. Okay, it only has. So, if I look at letter A, so we know that these two right here and here were not parallel because they were going to touch, but are these ones parallel? No, look, if I extend them, they're also going to make a triangle. So A is a no. Let's look at F. One pair of parallel sides. Those two, if I were to extend, right, they're going to eventually make a triangle. These two, if I were to extend this direction, would eventually make a triangle. So no, F is not a trapezoid either. Let's look at the letter G. Oh, I know right now they're not a trapezoid because they're already touching. Look, they're touching there and there. So if I go this line, maybe I should use red again. I think red was helpful. If I do this line and this line, this one's slightly more tipped. Can you see that? That if I were to keep going, this one's a little more tipped, they would eventually run into each other. And same with those ones. So G is not. H, one set of parallel. H is, I'm going to use purple to show you. H, we finally have our first trapezoid. Because look, top and bottom. See if they were to continue, They would go straight on forever. So those are parallel. So I'm just going to make parallel marks real quick. And the other ones are not because they would eventually run in and make a point. So finally we have our first trapezoid. That's exciting. I'm going to move it up there. All right, let's take a look at J. One set of parallel. So you're just looking for this and that. That would not be. They would eventually run into each other. And same with, well, I better double check that. So if I look at the angle that one's marked at, and look at the angle that one's marked at, yep, I can see this one's a little more tilted in, and so they would eventually hit each other. So that one is no. How about the letter K? I don't think so, because that one would eventually run into that one. Yeah, K is not a trapezoid. M? Nope, that one's slanted. Because it's not a straight line like the bottom, it's not going to be parallel. This one slants in a little, and this one is slanting. So this one, sorry, I should say, if you look at the corner right here, good way to tell us to look at corners, and to go, oh, it's tipped to the left a little. So if I want this one to be parallel, then sorry, not to the left, it's tipped to the right a little. So if I want this one to be parallel, it needs to tip to the right as well, and it doesn't. It tips to the left. So M is not a trapezoid. How about N? Definitely not. O? Well, the top and bottom both look straight. I'm going to use my purple because it's right here. Yeah, those are both straight. So that one is a trapezoid. And let's look at the next one. Letter P. Ooh, we got right angles. That doesn't really matter. Oh, it is. Look at the top and bottom. Those are both straight, not angling, so they would be classified as parallel. So there we go. Well, it spells hop. I don't know if you can see those. I'll move them down. There. Looking at the last two, we have Q and T. Q, it is not, because look how this one's straight and the top one's not straight. And then on the left, if you put a point there, it's tipped a little bit to the left. If I put a point here, well, that one does look tipped a little to the left, but I don't think it's the same angle. Let me see. Like that. Oh, this one's more steep. Yeah, they would eventually, if I were to keep going at this rate, clear up here, they would eventually touch. So not Q. Let's check out T. I can already tell it is, because look at the top and the bottom, straight lines. That's a pretty classic trapezoid, which is kind of cool because that has opposite sides congruent. It doesn't need to, but it's just kind of nice. So there we go. H-O-P-T. Those are all of our trapezoids. So over here in the box, H-O-P-T. Those were all of the shapes. Whew. So we just did a whole bunch of classification of all of these different shapes. It's kind of fun to sort them out. In the next video, you'll find out what you need to do next.